This is HealthWise Alternatives with Jackie Bell, promoting good health through information and education.
Hi, welcome to HealthWise. My name is Jackie Bell and I'm your host today. HealthWise is an educational program for women. We're dedicated to informing women about holistic health and medicine. Today our topic is how to beat the sugar blues, and we've invited a certified health nutrition counselor, Sheryl Turgeon, who is well known for helping women feel more vital and alive through eating whole, fresh foods. Sheryl, thank you for coming. We welcome you to our show.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let me tell you a little bit about Sheryl. She has a certification as a health and nutrition counselor from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition and Columbia University in New York City. She has a master's in public health from Boston University with a concentration in behavioral change, which I find very interesting. She also has a BS in psychology from Grand Valley State and a BA in journalism from Oakland University. So Sheryl, you're the one who titled our topic today called How to Beat the Sugar Blues. And we're going to be talking about sugar as a health issue for most of Americans. Can you just start us off with why you chose the title to be How to Beat the Sugar Blues instead of How to Beat the Sugar Highs?
Good question. I think really sugar affects all of us. When you think about the history of sugar, when it was first introduced in the early 1800s, we put it on our breakfast porridge, and within 1 year, Americans were using it up to 10 pounds per person per year. Today, we use over 170 pounds of sugar per person per year.
So that's like our body weight or more per year.
Absolutely. So it affects all of us. And I guess the aspect of being the sugar blues is that it has health consequences for all of us. It really feeds inflammation, which is what underlies so many chronic conditions, from diabetes, metabolic syndrome, obesity, arthritis, the suppression of the immune system. So really sugar is at the heart of so many things that we're suffering from as a culture today.
So for people many people have addiction or craving for sweets, but for people who don't necessarily have that, is it hard to avoid sugar in our diet?
Well, it is. You get it in so many things that you don't even realize. Things like soup and vegetables, especially frozen or canned. You can get it from bread. If you start reading the labels, you will find that it's hard not to get sugar. And I think it's the hidden sugars that add to that 170 pounds.
Right, that we're not realizing. So who in particular should be concerned about sugar or the overconsumption of sugar?
Well, I think we all should, because these statistics affect all of us. But people who already have a disease process starting, for example, someone who has type 2 diabetes, someone who may have metabolic syndrome who's on their way toward type 2 diabetes, people who are suffering with obesity. These are all impacted by sugar.
Okay, so basically everybody.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And the thing about sugar, is it addictive? Is that why we crave it?
It really is. Actually, there are a couple of factors that make it qualify as an addictive substance. First of all, when you eat sugar, you generally want more of it. It may not even be in the same sitting, but you will start craving it. The second reason is that if you try to withdraw from sugar, cold turkey, you can experience withdrawal symptoms like irritability, headaches, fatigue.
Wow.
So, yeah,
Yeah, because
really
when you think about withdrawal symptoms, you think of something, addictive like nicotine or caffeine,
right,
or alcohol, where you have withdrawal symptoms. But maybe that's why it is so hard for people to get away from sugar.
I think so.
That's very interesting. So how can you tell if you're sugar addictive or sugar sensitive, rather?
Well, one thing I like to do for participants in my class, if you'll bear with me,
Sure.
is I'd like to ask you to close your eyes for a minute and just imagine that you've walked into your house and you can smell the smell of freshly baked chocolate chip cookies. And you look around and nobody else is there, and you see this fresh, warm plate of cookies. What do? Now, if you can open your eyes, did you reach for a cookie?
Well, I smelled them because I love to smell them. I love the smell of them. But I would probably look to see what time it is on the clock, and if I needed a snack, then I would probably eat them with a handful of nuts or something. Otherwise, I don't really eat a lot of sweets. I would reserve them to eat with a meal.
Well, that's wonderful, and I think you're the exception to the
I
rule.
probably am.
Most people, when I ask that question, raise their hand that they at least ate one, if not 5 or the whole plate.
Right.
And the key is whether or not you were hungry. Someone who is not sugar sensitive would ask that question, do I feel like it right now? Whereas if you are sugar sensitive, that question never occurs to you.
So what causes the sugar cravings?
It can really be a variety of things. I think you need to look at your life and see if many times we're all so busy and we're on a rat race and maybe working and juggling kids and cleaning the home and all of those things. And you may just simply need a little sweetness in your life or a little comfort food.
Right.
But there are also some physiological reasons that we crave sugar. And if you think in terms of the Eastern philosophies that talk about the yin energy and the yang energy, the yin being the feminine energy and yang being masculine, at the one extreme with the yin is sugar and alcohol and fruits. And then down at the other extreme, with what we call the yang, would be the eggs, the red meat, the salt.
Right.
If you eat too much at either end of the spectrum, the body's natural tendency is to create balance. And you will start craving something at the opposite end of what you've been eating.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's a fun experiment to try.
Okay. And what can you do about sugar cravings? What do you advise?
One of the great things you can do, especially now that we have all of the winter root vegetables available, things like sweet potatoes, carrots, onions, parsnips, is to eat those winter root vegetables because they are sweet and they will help to satisfy your craving for something sweet. I also advise my clients to drink plenty of water. That keeps flushing things through your system and helps you to feel a feeling of fullness. Some other things is to really do what I call deconstructing the craving. So before you reach for that candy bar, just think about how you're feeling and what you're looking for.
Okay, that's really powerful.
Yeah, it really helps. And I think if, you know, some people like to do a journal and write down what they were thinking before they ate and how they felt after they ate.
Oh.
And it gives you a sense of whether that really satisfied you.
Right.
And of course, I'm a big advocate of eating a good breakfast in the morning. That does a tremendous amount to set you up to stay on a more even level, blood sugar-wise.
Okay.
And
that wouldn't be going through the coffee drive-through and getting a bagel with cream cheese.
Oh no, oh no.
Okay.
I'm talking about something like oatmeal with fresh fruit on it, some fresh berries, even something if you want to do something quick, some organic peanut butter on a rice cake is fine. But you need to start your day with food and break the fast. The other aspect of it is that caffeine can contribute to those sugar cravings, because really if you're starting your day with a lot of caffeine, you start to spike your sugar. Well, a little bit later it's going to drop.
Oh.
And the body wants a quick fix. So whatever will give it energy the quickest is what you're going to reach for, and generally that's candy or something sweet.
Okay, so if you eat something that's going to balance your metabolism, take a long time to digest, like peanut butter, then you're not gonna have those swings of you know, having a lot of energy but then having it drop off and being desperate to replenish yourself.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
makes
not
sense.
letting yourself get too hungry is another aspect.
Oh, so I hear of people eating more frequently throughout the day. Would that be a helpful way to try to control?
I think it depends on the individual. I eat the 3 meals a day, but I tend to get hungry around 10:30. So I might have an apple with a handful of almonds, and that will keep me going.
Right. Okay. So let's move on to the topic of artificial sweeteners. If sugar is so bad for you, and we know that people are reaching for artificial sweeteners because of maybe health concerns that they already have, tell us a little bit about artificial sweeteners and whether they are harmful or not.
I actually think that artificial sweeteners are probably worse than sugar. And I say that because not only, like sugar, do they strip you of your nutrients as you're metabolizing them, but they're filled with chemicals that your body doesn't really know what to do with.
Oh, okay.
And we don't really know yet what the ramifications are, but we have seen studies in rats, for example, that have developed cancer because of artificial sweeteners.
So when you're talking about the average person eating 170 pounds of sugar a year, if that was artificial sweetener instead, what do you think would our health risks be even higher?
I believe they would be, yeah.
Okay.
I think that you don't really want artificial chemicals in your body. You want the fresh, whole foods.
Okay, so that's how we're really going to beat the sugar blues, is by going to whole foods.
Right.
Okay. Well, that brings up the high fructose corn syrup, which a lot of people feel is, you know, okay to eat if they see it in the ingredients. It's not as harmful as sugar. But can you tell us why it would be unhealthy?
Sure. In fact, it's an area that I particularly feel concerned about, having seen ads lately that indicate that high fructose corn syrup is no worse for you than sugar. It's the processing, because it takes the corn and puts it through many processes, a complicated set of processes that involve many chemicals. There's a DVD out by a couple of young guys that graduated from MIT, and they go back to Iowa, actually, to their roots, where they buy an acre of land and grow a crop of corn and follow it all the way from Iowa to where it ends up in New York City in a convenience store.
Interesting.
And they got the recipe for high fructose corn syrup it had an ingredient in there that was so toxic, they were told they must wear masks and put on gloves, protective gloves, in order to add this ingredient.
So the ingredient was added to as part of the refining of the
corn syrup.
Okay.
Right, and it was a minute amount, but I can't imagine putting something like that in my body. I've done it.
Or a child's body.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And so then what would be some natural sweeteners as alternatives?
There really are more and more on the market these days. There is something called agave nectar, which comes from a cactus, and it's the consistency of honey. It's very good.
Is that easy to find?
Yeah, actually I've seen it now on grocery store shelves in the organic section.
Okay.
I've seen it at Ocean State Job Lot.
Oh
even.
my.
And let's see, we also have the stevia leaf.
Yes, that is probably one of the more commonly known ones, but tell us about that.
The nice thing about that is that it comes in packets like sugar, so it's easy to take with you and use it instead of sugar or an artificial sweetener. And both the agave and stevia are actually low glycemic, which means they would be helpful to someone who has diabetes or metabolic syndrome.
Okay, so they're a plant. They're
Yes.
plants, and that's why they would be low glycemic?
It's the fact that they're a plant, yes, but it's the fact that these are just the qualities, the properties that these
the
two
properties of the sugar.
natural sweeteners have.
Okay. And what about sugar in the raw? Some people, you think you're doing better because you're eating a sugar that's brown instead of white, as though it's less processed.
I hate to say this, but to our bodies, sugar is sugar.
Yeah.
Whether it's in the raw, it's turbino sugar, or it's still about 95% sucrose. So
Yeah.
you're doing the same
Same thing. Okay. Darn.
But there is a new alternative sweetener on the market called yacon syrup. That comes from the yacon root in New Zealand. And the amazing thing about that is that it does not seem to raise blood sugar at all.
Huh.
I have not seen that one in the stores. I've just found it online.
Okay.
But it's coming. I think it
And is
should
that
be.
the same thing where it's low glycemic?
It
It's a
is,
plant.
but even more effective.
When we're digesting sugar, you're saying that it's stripping the nutrients. Do these natural sweeteners that are low glycemic, do they have any nutritional value at all?
Yeah, they do, because they're coming with some of the fiber of the plant. In fact, some of the old standbys like honey, brown rice syrup, I think there are a couple others as well, that are sweeteners. Our body sees them as sugar, but they have some nutrients in them.
Molasses, would that fall in the category?
Yes,
Okay.
maple sugar, maple
sugar.
syrup.
Okay.
Yes,
All
absolutely.
right. And those tend to be less processed as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're eating a sweetener, but it has some redeeming value.
Right. Okay. Now, I think what would be really good to, if you could help us with, is where should people start when they're trying to reduce their sugar intake? Because really, there probably isn't any one of us who, if we kept a journal of what we actually ate, who couldn't use some reduction in their sugar intake. So what would be your advice on how we could do that as part of our lifestyle?
Well, I think what I would start with is looking at labels and making sure that the sugar you're getting is something that you are getting intentionally, not something that happens to be in something you eat.
Oh, so if I bought spaghetti sauce and I didn't notice that, I didn't even think that there was sugar in there, and I'm feeding that, okay, to my children.
The other thing would be to have more water. That helps. And to really start eating more whole grains, legumes, beans, which actually help to balance your blood sugar, and some of the natural proteins. Though by eating some of the whole fresh foods, I'm talking about fish and some of the beans.
The nuts fall in that category?
Nuts, absolutely.
Okay, seeds.
That will give you the nourishment that you need, and you're not getting that sugar that's creating cravings for more sugar.
Right. So what about those of us who we might have either a heavy work schedule or a very busy family schedule, and cooking isn't, we don't always have time for cooking, not every day anyway. So what would you suggest that we could maybe add or take away from our lifestyles to help us with sugar reduction?
Well, you know, it's a gradual process.
Okay.
And if you do introduce one thing at a time, you're still making lifestyle changes. For example, if you want to eat on the go and you grab a brown rice cake and put some organic peanut butter on it, you're good to go. If you want that apple and almonds, that's great. It's just starting to make whole food choices that are not really that complicated. You can always cook in bulk. Say on a Sunday, make that your cooking afternoon. I do this actually with oatmeal, where I'll cook enough oatmeal to last me for the week. I then, say on Monday, I'll just scoop a little out from my container in the refrigerator, put it in a pan, warm it up with a little bit of milk, put some berries on, and I'm good to go. And it took me 5 minutes.
Wow. Wow. So that's where I think all of us could use a little advice, and probably individual advice when we start to, once you start to get to know us and our lifestyle.
Yes, exactly.
So we've covered a lot. We've covered how much sugar affects our health, the fact that we're eating too much sugar. Is there anything that you would like to add as one last tip or a bit of advice for the average American who's consuming more than his or her body weight in sugar a year?
Well, I think one thing that our fast-paced lifestyles seem to require, we do look for quick fixes so that we can keep going and keep going. And maybe we need to stop sometimes. And sometimes that craving for sugar is really just a craving for a little bit of sweetness in our lives. And nothing can make us feel better than a warm hug by a loved one.
Right.
It will do wonders.
Right.
So.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that you've gotten some information that will help you understand how to stop and be a little bit more aware of how much sugar you're eating in your life every day and how it adds up and can be contributing to your health. And also, I hope that you've taken some of this information, that you'll take it with you and use it when you're in the grocery store or when you're making choices of what kind of sugar and how much sugar you're consuming on a regular basis. Sheryl, your information has been invaluable to the holistic approach to health, and we thank you so much for being on our show.
Oh, well, thank you. It was really a pleasure.
This season on HealthWise Alternatives, we will be interviewing holistic medical doctors, practitioners, and counselors who will explain natural medicine approaches to health and disease. HealthWise Alternatives is created by The Woman in You and Take One Films. Check our website, thewomaninyou.info, for scheduling information or contact your local cable access.